All right, yeah. So yeah, name is Sean Chatton. Instructor at Literacy Pittsburgh. And actually, I have my whole 13 years. I've been teaching adults. Maybe if 4 or 5 years teaching children as well. I'll teach anybody English. I love it. But I would say I'm kind of new to I would say the nonprofit sector. Let's say I had a lot of time at private institutes like Kaplan, which I might bring up, later on, if it's needed. All right. So I'm going to focus my presentation. Forgive me if I don't see any comments, but I'll try to look them over at the end. All right. So just to start, the audience I'm kind of looking for, who I think might be really interested in what I have to share are just members of nonprofit organizations providing ELL instruction. And then outside of that, just people who are curious about how AI might be affecting education. And the two main goals are just to show the benefits of localizing material. And I'll get to that in a second, pretty quick. And then secondly is kind of present how GAI, which is generative artificial intelligence, and OER, which is open educational resources, kind of work together to make this a viable direction for the ELL industry to follow, especially in the nonprofit sector. And, I will actually try to look at the chat right now, because I do want to ask everybody to kind of look at some of my resources that I use. And, in the chat, do you know anything that might, make them all similar, or which two might be, some of them might be a little different than the others? So I'll just give you a moment to look it over. I'm not going to go into detail about what each of these resources are. You might use them. I've used them in the past, and I use them in the present. And I will say, that 6 of them, make some of them different. Money makes some of them different. Yeah. Yeah, I'll say what makes a lot of them, 6 of them different than 2 of them. So let's say if we look at Marshall Reading and Literacy Minnesota ESL Story Bank, I think these 2 are especially different than the other 6 because they really focus on the local level. And the bottom 4, I think, really are kind of more free. If the ones at the top, you kind of have to pay. They might be a freemium model. Mango, I will point out, can be free, at least in Pennsylvania, with a library card. I think it might work everywhere if you have a library card with Mango, so props to them. So I like all of these, but there's really an issue with kind of localizing to my context in Pittsburgh. So when I look at Marshall and I look at Literacy Minnesota, they have not everything. They kind of do both, kind of a generalized, some open educational resources that are generalized to anybody, and then some that are really specific to Minnesota. And that really kind of influenced me and inspired me to kind of use AI to create more local content for my students. And location relevancy, I think, is something important to discuss, something important to look at, because I think relevant material is really what gets students interested. I'll leave a list. There's a couple big influences I have, but I think many people in ELL industry are influenced by The Natural Approach by Stephen Krashen, which really focuses on, hey, trying to make it interesting to the student, and making it relevant will make it interesting. And I've done pretty much all of these at some point in my life. I helped computer programmers specifically. I taught baseball players English for a period of time and still doing that kind of as a volunteer. Culture-wise, if you live overseas, you kind of teach to a culture in a way. Age, I taught, I would say middle-aged mothers with children in Boston. I had a class of 10 of them, so kind of the same age, so kind of that's relevant in a way. Economic class, again, I kind of taught in the private sector for some time, so you kind of have kind of a upper class which you can focus on certain content that you couldn't with a different economic class. But something that's always been a challenge is making it relevant to the specific location, just because with the other 5, if you create content, it can go anywhere, so that value can just be spread out almost to any geographical location. But when you focus on your city, especially if it's a city of like 50,000 people, what's going to be the value of doing that? It's really just going to be kind of for your program. So is that enough value to actually put in the effort to create something of high quality? And I think AI can kind of help this. So let me continue here. Just to put it in word form, text form, some value of location relevancy can be, it's just new immigrants to a city, just to get them introduced to it. Potential immigrants moving from another city, if you create material for your city and my students from Pittsburgh want, or maybe they get a new job in Kansas City. If there's material in Kansas City, I can start having them use that material to kind of get ready for the move. And also attitude towards immigrants and their integration, which just is basically like kind of twofold. I'll talk about donors in a second, but if there's donors or people who are supporting the program who aren't learning English, this material kind of make it more personal and more interesting, especially for volunteer tutors can say. And then immigrants as well will theoretically be more connected to the local area and help with integration that way. So just, everybody just kind of is a better neighbor, let's say. And when you get a story, well, a lot of what I do in terms of material is really focusing on a story. I think story is important for some parts I'll bring up later. And I've really focused on the student story. I would say, for this past year, I've been really working with AI. And, that student story can lead to text, it can lead to video. On the text side, it can produce some graded readers and some magazine articles. And I'll really focus on those two today. But also on the video side in the future, you can turn it into like mini documentaries, about certain neighborhoods perhaps, or how-tos, how to do this, how to do, how to fix something or how to cook something. So stories can really lead in many directions. And I think other types of stories can do the same thing, such as news stories, local news stories especially. Excuse me. Volunteer stories. So volunteers can kind of share their perspective or something about Pittsburgh, which could be valuable to learners as well. And as an educator myself, you shouldn't forget your story. I think a lot of students come to us as, even though we don't want to be, we kind of a center of attention and they want to get to know us. So, integrating, I'm not focusing on this so much right now, but in the future, I definitely want to kind of let my own story come out, let my own creativity come out and be proud of that as well, because I think that's what learners kind of want, looking for a mentor in their new locations. So this is a magazine I've kind of worked to create over the past 3-4 months. I used Canva to create it. And it's something that's very specific to Pittsburgh. It's student material and it has many sections. I call it Here and There because journeys, stories from here in Pittsburgh, stories from their countries, and then stories of transition. If you look on the sidebar, there are photo stories, reviews, culture, ask the editor type question, and then some language puzzles and announcements. Maybe in the breakout rooms, I can go into more detail on these different sections if you'd like. But I just want to present kind of a way I've been collecting stories and then using AI artwork, as well as, with a magazine, one of the biggest problems is time it takes to edit. So I've been using it to edit student stories, especially to get it to the right word count to fit the page. All right, so if a student gives me their story, I can use different AI tools to kind of just reduce it to 300 words or 100 words. And, one of the stories is by PK. Again, I don't use student names. I use permission to use their photos if they would like. Maybe I use their names in the future, but I don't find it so important right now, especially for kind of just a pilot. But, I think each program could make their decision on that. And yeah, with these stories, you have the text, and this text can be interesting for many reasons. It can be for donors, but for other students, for the community. And one thing I add is a little QR code at the bottom that you can scan, especially after it's printed. You have to scan it. You can't really click the link, and it'll take you to a Google form, which was also created kind of using AI to adapt it. Going back really quickly, you might be like, Sean, are you taking what the student wrote with kind of maybe not perfect English? Are you putting it into, ChatGPT or Bard or whatever, and then just making it perfect English and then putting it here? Sort of, but I also want to maintain it as much as possible. And you kind of direct it to maintain it as much as possible. And then I make sure I go to the student and make them read it and make sure they know every single word and can verify that they know it. All right. So and this could be kind of a debate, is this exactly what the student wrote? No, but it's like 90% what the student wrote, and then that other 10% I help them understand it, and it becomes their story, and they have power over editing it as well afterwards. So just wanted to make that clear from the outset. And some other things that story can go to is some graded readers, which aren't exactly going to be what the student wrote either, because you're going to have to modify it. But I take that story, and using DALL-E 3 at the moment is the best one in my opinion for image generation. We'll just kind of create more of an illustrated style story where this is not exactly what she wrote. I kind of put it down to a B2 level, according to the CEFR. And the illustrations can kind of help students follow it, and they also add a different element of possible lessons that you use based on images. Just to show you another image, the style is not perfect the same, but image generators will get better. There's a lot of weaknesses with image generation, which I can talk about in the breakout room. Some things maybe you have to look out for, some tips. It does take some time, but I think it's worth it, and you get some interesting products out of it. And just to show, this was taking it from kind of a B2 level down to an A2 level. All right. So, you can do the same story and just do it for many different students. And quite quickly. It's not super quickly. It does take a little time, but it's way faster than it was in the past. And then you have that story, but you want to meet some certain standards, whether it's CCR standards or CASA standards, whatever standards you have. You can, I use ChatGPT 4, and it has kind of this tool which allows you to put in kind of these umbrella-like instructions. It allows you to upload a PDF of the standards that we use at Literacy Pittsburgh. And then you basically have instructions that you would give it specifically. So I copied and pasted the story, Dream for Me Argentina, and recommended, different ELL activities that would meet in different CECR anchors. So after that input comes this output. I don't expect you to read all this. Again, this is something you might look at later in the slides, but very quickly it kind of produces 7 activities. And these are not groundbreaking activities. There's research projects, narrative writing, debates. I think one of the big tools I found is it helps me think less about this. It helps me think, I think Barack Obama was famous for just always having the same white shirt. It's kind of that same principle. You just make less decisions so you can focus more on what's truly valuable. And so I think that's a big value of it. A lot of it's not going to be, something super innovative lesson, but it'll help kind of direct your mind, and then you can make it innovative yourself. All right. You can even dive into deeper. If you like activity 6, you can ask it to, dive deeper into that. Yeah, I do see some questions at the bottom. I'm going to keep moving. They're all great. Wish I could answer them now. Just want to make sure that I finish. And yeah, just some other projects that I've worked on. A lot of these actually, to be honest, I've only done this maybe for like 3 or 4 months, really focusing on localization. So a lot of these stories are lightly about Pittsburgh, and I think I could do much more in terms of stories based on how to use the public transit system, for example, right? Or very specific neighborhoods. You can really get in depth about specific neighborhoods that, is just more than just kind of a general Pittsburgh feel. You can do it for seasons. I have a little kind of poem book that I did about autumn and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of scratching the surface myself, but I have lots of ideas kind of ready to be used. And it's, I've been producing much more than I ever have in the past. And just one more thing about kind of image generation is embracing the imperfections. When I generate images, it does take some time to find the right ones. But don't get obsessive over it. I really like this one. It was kind of one of my final slides for Tim's hungry. He eats and then, he finds a park in Pittsburgh and takes a nap. And, I just really liked this image. But there is a very obvious AI error in the image. So I don't know if you guys kind of have found it. I don't know how obvious it is. Yeah, so Michelle says he must be a great piano player. Why do you say that, Michelle? If you haven't spotted the big error here, the big one I would say is he has, yes, 6 fingers, right? So there's 6 fingers on his hand, and you might be like, oh no, the image is perfect, but he has 6 fingers. Just go with it. Go with it. And something I do with my students as well is just having them see what an AI image is. I tell them that, this is an AI image. There are incorrections. And I think this is important for their lives in general because there have been a lot of recent scams about fake products online. For example, a jacket that they see in an image, and there have been some scams where people think it's a real jacket and they buy it and they lose $40, right? So being able to identify what is an AI image can be part of the lesson. And they have to use some pretty complex grammar to express what's wrong. So there's so much that can be done with just this kind of error thing. And if you're from Pittsburgh, you'll notice the Gulf Tower right here does not have a gold dome. So, this little tower is also, also incorrect. And then little things too, that I don't need to get into at the moment. And yeah. And so the value for a curriculum is, I just see it as a central glue for many activities that can be used. And they're local stories, and that will make your curriculum naturally local if you focus on the stories of people around you. It promotes, emotional and social connections with the classmates and community. And then there's a lot of, research that indicates that story enhances memory. If you think of like the method of loci, memory palace, just the idea that story really does help memorize vocabulary. Localized material doesn't have to be story. I just think it's an easy place to start. If you're wondering where to start, just find a story and it makes it local. And then last thing about stories is for donors. As nonprofits, it's very important to get that money. So we want to make an emotional connection with people who are reading, and that their actions are making a difference in our students or learners. And then it gives dignity and context to them. So I think that really helps a student story as well. One that's, in depth too. You can kind of do 2 pages of it and it's not so much work. Now, advantages I would say, and when I put advantages here, I try to use as few words as possible. So you're going to have to listen to kind of understand the context a lot of this. It's kind of the advantages of our industry, doing kind of a localization, focusing on this localization relevancy. And that is, uh, this idea of LLMs, ChatGPT, AI is really clean communication wise. It's just such a clean communicator of ideas. It might not be true, right? But it communicates things quickly. And we want to make sure that our learners are getting as much true information as possible. But when it's a story, be some leeway. And I guess this is an advantage because other parts of Literacy Pittsburgh cannot use AI right away. Building content, building a curriculum can, but things like human resources or, other things dealing with actual business side of things are very hesitant about using AI. But I think it's safe in the way that I use it at the moment. So we can kind of just get started right away. We don't have to kind of wait maybe another 6 months or a year. It's creative, kind of a creative endeavor. And I think our workforce and our industry is a creative industry. I meet lots of people who love writing on the side. They love using words, talking about words. And really, LLMs, what's there right now, if you're good at using language, if you're creative, you're going to have an advantage in this space. And then in the, Literacy Pittsburgh, I talked about Literacy Minnesota. When I look at their curriculum that they created, that's open it's OER, I'm like, this can be used in our context, because I think a lot of our institutions kind of have a shared model. There's definitely going to be some differences, but it's kind of a shared model, some similar goals and some similar challenges. So I think, kind of we all can work together in this way because we all kind of have a similar situation. And there's so many people in this industry as well. Some of the challenges can be time. So time is always a challenge, especially, with everybody's busy lives. I want to do this, but I might not have the time to do this extra little project, right? We might all have similar goals, in different regions. So but coordination can be difficult. We're in different states, with somewhat different plans. That can be a problem. And then learning curve, it's a big new world, I guess. So people might be intimidated by the learning curve. And just to present some quick solutions, okay, for, the time, open educational resources, right? If I can do my little part and I can make it open for anybody to use, you guys can use it, including some raw data where you can copy and paste it and change it from Pittsburgh to maybe whatever your area is, making it relevant into your location and then altering a few different things can save time. Or if you think what I create can be used as is, please do. Save you time there. And standardizing can help kind of the coordination of thing. We're all from different areas of the country perhaps, but if we standardize all the material, that can help. And then, just participating, just using these things will help with the learning curve. And I'm going to get into this in more detail. I think I have about 5 minutes. I think I'll finish. For OER, yeah, many hands make light work. And that's easier said than done. It's a common phrase, but it's true. There's so many of us. So if we all do a little bit, I do believe that we can have, we can build curriculums that can be sustainable for a long period of time. And reusable. So, open educational resources can be reused. They can be adapted. So I just think it's a huge advantage to do this. Now you might be like, hey, I do want to get some financial benefit for my work. I do believe there could be some benefits in the future. I think that's something that could be worked out later on where you get rewarded if your content's used a lot. But that's, I think, a discussion for a different day. But I do believe, you could be possibly rewarded for this in the not too distant future. So for standardizing, AI is really good at pattern recognition and replicating things. We know simple is effective, making sure things are simple is maybe okay for adult learners who might not be able to come to every class. So just having kind of repetitive material can be good. And then some good quality control in something like Skillbox from World Education could be one kind of centralized organization that kind of cleans up what we might use and make it accessible and easy to use for everybody. And then participation, kind of my final part here. This part is just, as a teacher, I'm here just showing what's possible, and hopefully that motivates somebody. Have fun with it. I spent some extra time, but it's almost like a little hobby of mine. I really enjoy it. And then, like Yunja said, is reflecting on your role as an educator. You know, who are we going to be as teachers? Are we going to be content creators or journalists or networkers? Are we going to be the glue between society and these new immigrants? And some influences, which you guys can click on later on, is the natural approach. And I really like Judy Willis's one, which kind of brings science into it. She has lots of other research in that article, which can link to why, this type of very much story-based material can be really interesting and effective for our students. And then my curriculum from our organization.